Emily trusted her mother, Linda, with everything until the night she discovered Linda was having a secret affair with her boyfriend, Ryan. What began as a picture-perfect family bond spiraled into a chilling tale of betrayal, obsession, and a deadly twist that no one saw coming. In this shocking true crime story, loyalty is shattered, and the line between love and manipulation blurs, leaving behind a tragedy that would haunt them all forever. The Anderson family lived in the quiet, tree-lined suburbs of Corvallis, Oregon. Their two-story colonial-style home was the kind you'd find on postcards, neatly trimmed hedges, bright shutters, and a white picket fence. Inside that home was Linda Anderson, a 42-year-old high school English teacher who was known around town for her friendly smile and involvement in community events. A widow for nearly a decade, Linda had poured her heart into raising her only daughter, Emily. The two shared a bond that many admired, one built on love, mutual respect, and what seemed like unshakable trust. Emily, now 19, had just begun her first year of college at a local university. She was bright, ambitious, and quiet, a young woman who found joy in simple things like painting, journaling, and long walks in the park. Growing up with only one parent hadn't been easy, but she and Linda had created a world that worked. Linda played both mother and father, cheerleader and counselor, best friend and protector. Their home was filled with laughter, long talks over tea, and shared routines that gave their days rhythm and comfort. It was during the summer before college that Emily introduced Ryan Carter into their lives. He was 22, tall, athletic, and studying business at a nearby college. He had the kind of confidence that made him instantly likable, funny without trying too hard, kind without being soft. Emily fell fast. Ryan was her first serious relationship, and she was excited to share every detail with her mother. Linda welcomed Ryan warmly. She saw how happy he made her daughter, and she appreciated his respectful manner. He called her Miss Anderson at first, offered to help with groceries, and never overstayed his welcome, at least, not in the beginning. Soon, Ryan became a fixture in their lives. He joined them for dinners, family movie nights, and Sunday morning breakfasts. Linda started including him in casual texts, sending him photos of the meals she was cooking or inviting him to run errands with her and Emily. At first, it felt innocent, even charming. Linda would sometimes joke that Ryan was like the son she never had. Emily found comfort in knowing her mother and boyfriend got along so well. To her, it meant they were truly becoming a family. But over time, small things began to change. Linda became more invested in her appearance, buying new clothes, wearing makeup more often, even changing her hairstyle. Emily noticed but thought little of it, assuming her mother was simply enjoying a new phase of life. Ryan, too, seemed different. He lingered at the house even when Emily wasn't around, often claiming he was waiting for her or helping Linda with something. There were moments that made Emily pause, a long glance exchanged between them, a conversation that ended abruptly when she entered the room, but she dismissed these thoughts quickly, not wanting to seem jealous or insecure. By the start of Emily's college semester, the dynamics in the house had shifted. Emily, busy with classes and assignments, wasn't around as much. Ryan, meanwhile, still visited frequently, sometimes under the pretense of checking in on Linda or picking something up. Linda, who had always been open about her daily life, now seemed guarded, locking her phone screen when Emily entered the room and offering vague answers about her whereabouts. Emily chalked it up to the stress of transition, assuming that her mother might be struggling with loneliness now that she was spending less time at home. What no one saw was the quiet, emotional distance that was growing between mother and daughter. Conversations became shorter, smiles less frequent. Emily felt it but couldn't explain it. It was as if a curtain had been drawn between them. Linda continued to present herself as the doting, supportive parent, but something unspoken lurked beneath the surface. And Ryan, once affectionate and engaged, now seemed distracted when alone with Emily, his attention often drifting elsewhere. He began forgetting details she had shared, canceling plans, and offering empty apologies. It was during this period that the illusion of perfection began to crack. Friends who once envied Emily's home life noticed she was less talkative, more withdrawn. Even Linda's colleagues remarked that she seemed distracted and distant. Yet no one suspected what was actually unfolding inside that home. The truth, buried under layers of smiles and social niceties, was growing darker each day. A secret had begun to form, one that would soon spiral far beyond control, threatening to destroy not just a relationship, but the very foundation of trust and love that had held the Anderson family together for so many years. Emily tried to convince herself that everything was fine. She focused on her studies, told herself Ryan was just busy, and that her mother's new habits were simply part of midlife changes. But her instincts nagged at her, gnawed at her during quiet moments when she couldn't escape the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just in her mind. There were patterns she could no longer ignore, subtle shifts that felt too intentional to be coincidence. Ryan's behavior had grown increasingly erratic. He once texted her throughout the day with jokes, updates, and sweet messages. Now, hours would pass with no word from him. He often gave flimsy excuses. His phone had died, he had fallen asleep early, or he had been studying. Emily tried to understand, but the warmth between them had faded. Even during their time together, he seemed distant. He rarely made eye contact, and when she spoke, he often looked past her, as if searching for something or someone else. Meanwhile, Linda seemed unusually cheerful. She cooked more often, played upbeat music around the house, and began humming as she cleaned, a habit she hadn't had in years. She had started spending more time outside of the house, too, claiming to be out shopping or visiting colleagues, though her stories were vague. Emily once noticed her mother's perfume lingering in the hallway long after she claimed to have returned from a jog. It was strange, but again Emily reasoned that perhaps she was overthinking things. Still, small details kept piling up. One afternoon, Emily came home early from class after a professor canceled the lecture last minute. The house was quiet when she entered, but she heard footsteps upstairs. Expecting her mother to be home alone, she called out. There was a pause, an unnatural pause, before Linda appeared at the top of the stairs, flustered and surprised. She claimed she had been taking a nap, but her clothes were neatly pressed, makeup freshly applied, and the bedroom door had been shut tight. Emily scanned the room briefly but saw no sign of Ryan, yet something felt wrong. It was a feeling she couldn't explain, like the room had just been emptied of something important. A few days later, she stumbled upon something that shook her deeply. While using the family laptop to search for an old document, Emily accidentally opened a browser tab that hadn't been closed. It was a messaging platform, one she didn't recognize. The name on the account was a generic username, but the messages told a different story. The most recent conversation was brief, playful, and intimate. Phrases like, "I can't stop thinking about last night," and "she's starting to suspect" appeared. Her heart raced as she scrolled further. No names were mentioned, but the tone was unmistakable. Emily closed the laptop, hands trembling. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't confront her mother without proof, and she feared accusing Ryan without being certain. Her world was unraveling, and she had no one to turn to. Friends wouldn't understand. They still saw Ryan as the perfect boyfriend and Linda as the picture of maternal strength. And Emily wasn't ready to shatter that illusion, not yet, so she watched. She paid closer attention. She began to test them in subtle ways, asking Ryan about his day, throwing in small lies to see if he'd notice the inconsistencies. He never did. She once told him she would be gone all afternoon, then returned home quietly, 2 hours early. Linda was alone, or so it seemed. But the back door was unlocked, and a man's sneakers were sitting by the kitchen entrance, shoes that did not belong to anyone in the family. When she asked, Linda said they were an old pair she found in the attic and that she planned to donate them. Emily nodded, but she didn't believe a word of it. The distance between Emily and her mother widened. They spoke less. The shared laughter they once had was replaced by short exchanges and polite nods. Ryan barely touched her anymore, barely looked at her, but still kept showing up, always with some excuse, some reason to be near. Emily knew in her gut what was happening, but her heart refused to fully accept it. Each night she lay awake in bed, wondering how deep the betrayal went. Had it started with a glance? A shared joke? A touch? She tried to replay the moments that might have signaled the beginning, but found no clear answer. Just an overwhelming sense that the life she had trusted, the people she had loved most, were not who she thought they were, and that whatever secret they were hiding, it was growing bolder by the day. Emily knew she couldn't live in denial any longer. The tension in the house was suffocating. Each smile from her mother felt forced. Each word from Ryan seemed hollow. Their presence began to feel like a performance, one they were trying too hard to keep believable. The warmth that once defined her home was gone, replaced by a strange quiet, like the calm before a storm. Emily tried to focus on school, to keep her life from unraveling completely, but the suspicion ate at her constantly. She needed answers. Not vague theories or half-truths, but real proof, something that would confirm the fear she had been suppressing for weeks. One evening, she told Ryan she was going out with friends and wouldn't be back until late. She made sure her tone was casual, her smile convincing. Ryan barely reacted. He simply nodded and kissed her on the cheek, his eyes already drifting away from hers. Emily left the house, but didn't go far. She parked around the corner and waited. Minutes passed like hours as she sat in silence, heart pounding, watching the dark silhouette of her home from a distance. Nearly 40 minutes later, a familiar figure approached the front door. It was Ryan. Emily's breath caught in her throat. He knocked once before letting himself in with the spare key Linda always left hidden under the flower pot. That was the moment everything changed. Any doubt that lingered in her mind evaporated. He hadn't come to see her. She wasn't supposed to be home. There was only one reason for him to be there. Emily waited another 10 minutes before quietly returning to the house. She unlocked the door without a sound and stepped inside. The living room was empty, lights dimmed. She moved slowly through the hallway, careful not to make a sound. As she approached the staircase, muffled voices floated down, soft, private, unmistakably intimate. Her heart thundered in her chest. She moved up the steps like a ghost, each footstep placed with precision. The voices grew clearer. From the cracked door of her mother's bedroom, she saw them. Her mother and Ryan together in a way no mother and daughter's boyfriend ever should be. There was no mistaking what was happening. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was physical, present, alive in front of her. Emily didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned and left the house without a word. She spent the night at a friend's apartment, curled up on the couch, unable to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces, her mother's hands in his hair, Ryan's arm wrapped around her waist. She had never felt such fury, such sorrow. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, some terrible misunderstanding, but it wasn't. It was real, and it had been happening under her nose for who knew how long. The next morning, she returned home quietly. Linda was in the kitchen making breakfast, pretending like everything was normal. She asked about Emily's night with friends, smiled like the night before had never happened. Emily answered with short words, refusing to meet her mother's eyes. Ryan was gone, likely trying to stay out of sight. Emily didn't confront anyone, not yet. Instead, she kept her movements calm, her emotions tightly controlled. Over the next few days, she collected herself. She began to look back with new eyes. The late-night messages, the strange behavior, the shifts in energy, they all made sense now. Every little sign she had ignored had been pointing toward the truth. The two people she loved and trusted the most had not only betrayed her, they had conspired in silence, stealing something that could never be returned. Emily began writing down everything she remembered: dates, conversations, small clues. She didn't know what she was going to do with it yet, but she felt a strange sense of power in finally knowing. Her silence was no longer a burden, it was a choice. And with each passing day, she found herself growing more focused, more resolved. The pain didn't disappear, but it sharpened her, made her see the world more clearly. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the performance that came with it. The lies, the pretending, the way they both acted as if nothing had changed. But Emily had changed. The girl who once sought comfort in routine and trust in her family was gone. In her place stood someone colder, wiser, and unafraid of the storm that was about to break. Because one thing was certain now: secrets never stay buried forever, and theirs was about to come crashing into the light. Emily's silence did not mean surrender. In fact, it was the calmest she had felt in weeks. The ache in her chest was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had faced the truth and survived it. Now she needed to decide what came next. Confronting them felt pointless. They had already made their choices. She wanted something more than arguments and apologies. She wanted closure and maybe justice. So she began watching them, documenting everything with chilling clarity. If there was more they were hiding, she was determined to uncover it. At first, Linda and Ryan seemed unaware that anything had changed. Linda continued her usual routines, humming around the house, occasionally asking about Emily's classes as though nothing had shifted between them. Ryan still showed up now and then, offering weak smiles. Though he no longer made much effort to be alone with Emily, they both played their parts with unsettling confidence, never suspecting that Emily had seen behind the curtain. But she no longer trusted a single word from either of them. And something unexpected happened. Ryan stopped coming over. Days passed without a visit, then a full week. Linda grew quiet. She stopped humming. Her cheerful energy dulled, and she looked constantly preoccupied. Emily noticed her pacing the kitchen late at night, whispering on the phone, sometimes crying when she thought no one could hear. Emily listened from the hallway, heart pounding. Bits and pieces of conversation leaked through the walls, phrases like, "I can't do this anymore," and "she find out everything." It was clear that something had gone wrong between them. Emily suspected it was guilt or fear. Maybe the tension had finally cracked their secret open from within. She wondered if Ryan had grown tired of the lies or if he simply couldn't handle the weight of what he'd done. Either way, Linda was unraveling, and Emily could see it in the way her mother avoided her gaze, the way her hands trembled when she reached for her coffee mug. Then, early one morning, everything changed. Emily was jolted awake by the sound of a crash. It came from downstairs, sharp and loud. She ran out of her room, heart thudding, and found her mother lying unconscious at the bottom of the staircase. Her body was twisted awkwardly, motionless. For a moment, Emily just stood there, frozen. Then she snapped into action, calling emergency services with trembling fingers. An ambulance arrived within minutes, followed by police officers who began assessing the scene. At the hospital, Linda was placed in a medically induced coma due to head trauma. Doctors were unsure how long she would remain unconscious. The official report listed the fall as accidental, possibly caused by slipping on the stairs. But Emily wasn't convinced. The stairs had been clean, dry, and well lit. Something didn't add up. And when she visited the house again later that day, she found a half-empty glass on the kitchen counter, one that didn't belong to her or her mother. It was Ryan's favorite brand of iced tea. She told the police everything. The affair, the late-night visits, her suspicions about the fall. At first they were hesitant to consider foul play without hard evidence. But then came a breakthrough. Linda's toxicology report showed traces of a strong sedative in her bloodstream, one that could have made her lose consciousness before the fall. That changed everything. Ryan became the prime suspect. Officers went to his apartment, but he was gone. His phone was off, and his car had been abandoned at a nearby train station. A full-scale manhunt began. Emily, though shaken, felt validated. Her instincts had been right. Ryan hadn't just betrayed her, he had tried to silence the person who knew too much. Days passed with no sign of him. Then, in a cheap motel room 2 towns over, Ryan's body was found. He had taken his own life, leaving behind a handwritten note. In it, he confessed to the affair, describing how it began with flirty exchanges that spiraled into something darker. He claimed Linda had tried to end it, afraid of losing her daughter, and that he had panicked. He had drugged her drink the night she threatened to tell Emily everything. He hadn't meant to hurt her, he wrote, just to stop her from talking for a while. The note ended with an apology that rang hollow on the page. Emily read it once, then put it down. There were no answers in those words, only pain and cowardice. The betrayal had come full circle, secrets, lies, and now death. Her mother lay unconscious in a hospital bed, and the man who had torn their lives apart was gone. The silence he had tried to enforce had now become permanent. And Emily, left with the wreckage, had to decide how to move forward from the story no one would ever fully understand. The house felt colder now. Not just from the emptiness, but from the silence that clung to every wall, every piece of furniture. After the police investigation ended and the news crews disappeared, Emily found herself walking through rooms that once held laughter and trust, now replaced by memories too sharp to ignore. Linda remained in a coma for several more weeks. Doctors were cautiously optimistic, but each day she stayed asleep felt like a reminder of how far things had fallen. Emily visited, but she didn't speak to her. What could she say? There were no words strong enough to express the fracture between them. She tried to continue with her classes, showing up for lectures, completing assignments, and pretending she was okay. On the outside, she kept up the image, but inside she was unraveling. Everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and family had been turned inside out. She couldn't trust her memories anymore. Every smile from her mother felt like a lie when she looked back. Every kind gesture from Ryan felt calculated. There was no peace in remembering, only questions that never found answers. The media labeled it a scandala. Tragic love triangle, a mother-daughter betrayal, a story that captivated the public for weeks. Headlines used words like shocking and unbelievable, but none of those captured what Emily felt. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a sense of being erased from her own life. She hadn't just lost a boyfriend or a mother's trust. She had lost the version of herself that believed in safety and honesty. The girl who used to confide in her mother, who once believed in love, was gone. When Linda finally awoke, it was as if time had stopped and restarted in the same breath. Emily visited her at the hospital, sitting in the chair beside the bed, watching her mother struggle to adjust to a world that had moved on without her. Linda was weak, confused, and often silent. She asked for Ryan once. When the nurse gently told her he had passed away, she didn't cry. She simply stared ahead as if trying to remember how she had gotten here. Emily didn't offer comfort. She didn't hold her hand. She sat quietly, letting the distance between them speak for itself. Eventually, Linda was discharged and returned home. But home was no longer the place they had once shared. It was a shell stripped of warmth. She moved into the guest bedroom, kept to herself, and avoided Emily as much as Emily avoided her. They lived like strangers under the same roof, two people with shared history but no present. Conversations were brief, mostly about groceries or mail. They never spoke about Ryan. They never spoke about what had happened. The silence was heavy but familiar. Months passed, and slowly Emily began to rebuild. She started therapy, where she found the space to speak freely for the first time. Her therapist encouraged her to write, and soon she was journaling obsessively, pages filled with memories, thoughts, rage, sorrow. It helped. It gave her control over the story that had once stolen everything from her. Eventually, those pages became something more. She submitted a few essays to a local magazine under a pseudonym. The response was overwhelming. People reached out, thanking her for putting words to the kind of betrayal they had also endured, the kind that was hidden behind closed doors and whispered apologies. Emily realized she wasn't alone. Her pain was unique, but the themes were universal: secrets, betrayal, healing. That realization sparked something in her. She compiled her writings into a memoir, raw and unflinching, not to shame her mother or relive the pain, but to reclaim her voice. The book was published under her real name. It reached thousands, then millions. Book tours followed, interviews and panels where she shared her story not as a victim, but as a survivor. Linda never read the book. She never asked about it, and Emily never offered a copy. They continued to live apart, emotionally distant, bound only by blood and memory. Occasionally, Linda would leave notes on the kitchen counter grocery lists, reminders, sometimes a simple "hope your day went well," but they never discussed what had come between them. That conversation remained buried, perhaps forever. In the end, Emily didn't find closure in forgiveness. She found it in truth, in naming what happened, in refusing to hide it behind shame or silence. Her life would never be what it once was, but it became something new, stronger, clearer, more honest. She carried the scars quietly, but not with shame. And as she moved forward, she knew the story that had once broken her would no longer define her. It had shaped her, yes, but she had written the ending. And in doing so, she had finally taken her life back.